gamer.
Welcome everybody to the latest installment of the SGO Developer Spotlight. Mike Strum, managing editor of Sports Gamers Online here, and I'm here today with the creator behind the game Legend Bowl, the head of Level Ready Studios or Level Ready Games. You know him as King Javo. I know him as Javier Martinez. Javier, thanks for taking the time and joining me today.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm excited to talk about some football today. Let's go.
So we'll kick things off with Legend Bowl and what led you to getting started and the motivation behind making a game like this?
Well, it goes way back to my childhood, playing all of the old retro games. I grew up in the 80s era with all the great classics, your Nintendo games, your Mario, your Zelda, all the games of the past, and even the entire arcade era. But a lot of it it started with 10-Yard Fight, games like that, and Cyberball and Tecmo Bowl, which is a huge inspiration for Legend Bowl. And, fast forwarding another 30, 40 years later down the road, I've always wanted to make a game. I've worked in the technology field for a long time, and getting into the entertainment business is not that simple. I used to work at EA Sports, and then I went on to another path. But long story short, it was a passion of football games, sports games, and games in general. And then also me finding an opportunity in my life to kind of just take a little bit of a vacation or a detour from my career and try to get something started like other indie developers out there are doing. And something that I think in terms of football is really missing right now in the industry. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and demand and hunger for other sports products, especially when it comes to football.
When it comes to, before getting into the football game specifically, when it comes to the game's art style, was there a specific reason that went into why pixel art and that style, or was it just that's what made sense to you? It's something you've always liked. What went into that decision?
I mean, that was not an easy decision to make. I mean, for me, it was either, okay, hey, I can go 3D models and try to do animations like the AAA studios will do. And there are other indie games out there that are using 3D models in a 3D space. But for me, it was like, okay, let me look at my resources. Let me look at how much I can actually do. This is my first real commercial product that I'm making. I spent plenty of years working on hobby games, but it was kind of a mixture between what can I actually do that's feasible with my time and resources and skills. And then also, really the big thing for me is the fact that making pixel art and working on a pixel art game is something that I'm a huge fan of the style. I think it's the kind of style that never ages. I think you could have pixel art from 20 years ago, like games that were on Neo Geo, for instance. Those were classic games. And even like today, you play some of those games, and I've bought Neo Geos just to play them. And those games do not really take a lot of, hit when it comes to, their age. And you play games that are on the old PlayStation or even like the Nintendo 64, and those polygon type graphics, there's a market for that, but they don't age very well. And so it was a mixture between what can I do, but also an art style that I think never really got the amount of quality or complexity that we could get using today's engines and technology that we have out there.
With the game specifically, with Legend Bowl, it seems especially on the independent level, the football genre is getting bigger. There are a lot of installments, a lot of indie developers coming in. When building out the game, what do you keep in mind to separate, other than the art style, because it is very different than any of the other independent games out there, but to keep interest or keep yourself different from what else is being developed and stand out from what is becoming a somewhat crowded field right now?
Well, that's part of the reason too, because going back to the pixel art and going for a 2D game, I knew, and I still know it's a risk, because there aren't many games out there that are doing it in 2D. And the ones that are, a lot of them are going to mobile. I mean, there are games out there that are already doing what I've been trying to do for the past. It's been about 3 years now that I started this, almost 3 years actually, that I've started this path. And for me, it was like, okay, I cannot compete with Madden. I can't compete with the AAA games. It's not going to happen. And it's not even going to look very good. If I try to sit here and work on a game that was a 3D game and try to make it somewhat 2K like, which, you know, those games were, to me, the best that were ever made when it comes to football. I say to myself, I couldn't do that, right? So it came down to the fact that there are really not that many options when it comes to a 2D pixel art game. And one like the one I'm making, I feel like there's a hole there. There's a gap there that can be filled if I can get the right things done in the game, and I could tailor it to an audience that would enjoy that kind of a game. So it was just a mixture of things, but there really is no competition, in my opinion, to the exact type of style of game that I'm making. You have to really jump into a 3D level, and at that point, I feel like you really get shadowed by the AAA games.
And that's a big point. You get overshadowed because you make a 3D game, and in a way, and I've seen it not just in football but in any other market, if you make a 3D sports game, you're automatically entering that comparison and to the AAA. And a lot of people, in my opinion, just from my experiences and even coming from a software development background personally, I feel like a lot of people don't really understand, in a way, what it really goes into making a 3D style game, especially in today's standards where everything is much more expensive to make. Everything is much harder to make, to where trying to compare these smaller titles to the big boys of the AAA markets like a 2K or EA Sports is just, it's unfair to those smaller studios trying to put out a product. Wouldn't you kind of agree on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And part of the thing that's actually surprising, I have, you know, even though I started with a 2D space, I'm a very simulation-minded guy. If anybody out there follows me, for those who do follow me, they know that I'm very much about simulation and reality and trying to get a game that looks and feels like the actual sport and represents the sport to the fullest. And it's funny because I've had a hard time because I've jumped into a 2D space with Legend Bowl, with pixel art. But to be honest with you, it really is 3D in a lot of ways, because you have an axis, even though it's a two-dimensional axis, the X and Y, you also create a fictional Z axis where when you throw a ball and it's going through the air, you know, you have to also represent, a fake axis now. So in some ways it becomes harder. And I didn't realize that until, too far into the project. But when it comes to animations, yes, you get a little bit easier, but at the same time, I don't do pixel art. I have an artist that does it for me, and he's absolutely fabulous with what he does. But that in itself is way over my pay grade or my skill set. But and that takes a lot of work. I don't think pixel art gets enough appreciation, but it's also doable. I don't have to worry about hiring an entire mocap studio to give me animations, and then now I have to worry about making those look realistic in a game, which, as you know, that's one of the biggest problems when it comes to sports games are the animations. And I think 2K still, not to promote 2K too much here, but they did it the best. And so when it comes to my game, it is a huge learning curve and complexity to it that to this day I still complain. I'm like, man, why did I choose a football game?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest. I feel like of the sports, football might be the hardest. And this is just based on talking to you and other independent developers, the hardest to replicate on the field. I don't envy. There's a reason I left software development to move to do website development, because it's just I personally couldn't cut it, and that's just where my skill set is. Before getting into the features of the game itself, you talk about having an artist do the pixel art. How big is the team actually working on?
The team is, it's I'm a solo developer on it, right? But I also have an artist that I have freelanced to do all of the artwork for the game. And then I also have a musician. So really right now it's 3 people, 1 basically full-time and 2 that are part-time as needed. But there's been a lot done when it comes to the art. And even the music is a nice soundtrack that I already have finished. It's just a matter of, getting it out to the final product.
With the game itself, there's the gameplay. I know for those who don't know, and there might be a lot of people watching and listening to this that have no idea what Legend Bowl is, which is ultimately the goal of what we do, is to bring it out to the masses. The game will have a bracket style tournament. It'll have quick games. I know the plans are to have a season mode within the game. Is that something you want to have in the game at launch, or for launch of the game, are you focusing on, okay, I just want this gameplay to be as close to perfect as it possibly can?
Well, I want it all, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as the timeline, I mean, I've been working on this for too long now. Even though, if you look at the scale of time it takes to make a video game, many people don't understand how long it takes, especially if you're one person. And on top of it, you're making a football game, which I 100% agree and have lived through your sentiments about football being the most difficult sport to have to develop, because it is. And there's no doubt about it. I strongly believe that, and I've actually lived through it. But when it comes to the actual release point, there's a whole entire business side of it where I could sit here, if there was no monetary component to it, I could sit here for 20 years and probably still continue to make Legend Bowl. I mean, that's how much room there is to improve a football game. And that there are games out there, I'm not going to name the one, but there are games out there that still can't get it right. And they've been out for decades, right? So football is one of those things that I think you can be working on and fine-tuning almost forever, infinitely. And when it comes to my game, my plan is I've worked heavily on the customization when it comes to changing player faces and hair and uniform colors and all that sort of thing. So I put a lot of time into doing that, and that's a whole entire other subject we could get into. But I've worked on the pillars of the game have been customization, but mainly gameplay, and trying to make sure that the gameplay was as sound as it can be to be able to feel good on the field, because that I think is the most important aspect to any game, let alone a sports game. So for me, it's been, for the release, to answer your question, I'm planning on having, obviously, a quick mode exhibition match with stat tracking on teams and players, etc. Player customization. The season mode has already been started. It's a career mode. You're going to walk through a bit of a tutorial, and then you'll work through at least one full season of the game to get me started, so that you have some kind of a mode to get into and engage yourself and build a team, etc. I mean, the ultimate goal would be to do a franchise, obviously, and I think that's going to be phase 2 of the product. And then as far as other modes like tournament mode, etc., those are in the works, but there's no dead set. I'm not sure 100% on that when it comes to release. And real quick, let me just talk about the model of the game. So the game is going to be released on Steam, and I'm not sure what the price is yet, but it will go on Steam, and then from there it will hopefully grow some wings and then get over to the different consoles and maybe even mobile. That all comes down to how well it does and what kind of support we get. But the idea and the strategy with the game is going to be to put the game out on Steam and continue to build it through patches and through releases, so that if you pay whatever it's going to be for the game, you will eventually see patches that come out, and all of a sudden now you have a franchise mode, potentially. So that's kind of the model that I'm going for. I didn't go early access because I didn't want to take that route for different reasons, but it's going to kind of be like an early access where, hey, here's the game, play it, have fun, give feedback, and it's going to be improved and improved and improved as the years go on.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, the idea of early access, but you answered it right there. It's not going to be early access, but it kind of is when it launches, because obviously support, play the game, provide your feedback. When it comes to the gameplay, you mentioned that being a big part. when you're not dealing built with animation studios and motion capture, you are doing everything, all the interactions, piece by piece, frame by frame. How do you, and this might be getting too into the weeds, I guess, but how do you make it so that you have the offensive line and defensive line interact with each other, the tackling actually look not where they're like Jenga blocks falling over? What goes into that, just the level of detail that goes into getting those types of things right?
You know, it's funny because whenever, and I'm gonna answer your question, but real quick, whenever somebody mentions another football game coming out, and we've heard a lot of noise from different developers, and then all of a sudden they disappear. There's a reason why nobody or a lot of people aren't making football games, and it's exactly why you said. I mean, you have 11 on 11 playing in a field that there's nonstop chaos happening. At any moment, you can have 1 to 4 players bouncing into each other. And with all of those things going on, you also have to worry about getting a pass thrown to a receiver and what happens when the ball's in the air. And like you even say, like lining up. I mean, the simple things of lining up on offense and a defense. I mean, rewind, pick a play, right? Pick a play, through an entire playlist, and then take that and go into the actual down and line people up the right way. Make sure the right depths are being set with your depth chart. Hiking the ball. I mean, the entire architecture of a football game alone could be a thesis that you write as a doctoral student. I mean, it is absolutely mind blowing what it takes. And making games period is huge, but taking all of those components and combining them into a logical, organized fashion in the midst of being in this chaotic world is crazy. I mean, it's absolutely nuts what it takes. And I've had to, that's why it's taken so long for me to do the game too. I mean, I'd say the bulk of what I've worked on, about at least 50% of what I've worked on, has been the actual gameplay and making sure that all the actors and all the NPCs are working the way they should. And for those of you who don't know what I just said, I'm referring to the players themselves. So those players are basically AI robots walking around the field and having to navigate different behaviors without falling apart. And a lot of games you see the bugs of those errors, and I'm sure Legend Bowl will have some. I mean, every game does, but it's been a challenge, but it's also been rewarding because I feel like the gameplay is really close to being clean and fun, and I think it's a lot more accurate to the sport than a lot of the 3D games that I've played.
Yeah, and you talk about like bugs and ideas and just it's rewarding. Just my personal experience, and maybe you can attest to it as well, is there's something just that makes you feel good when you find a bug and you spend so much time trying to fix it, and then when you finally get it right, it's just very satisfying to solve or cross a hurdle when it comes in the development of a specific process.
I mean, it can be. It depends on the bug. I mean, some bugs are so and man, bugs are. It's funny because I was just working on the game before we talked, and bugs just pop up all the time. And whenever you change something over here on the left, you break something on the right, and it's crazy because bugs are one of those things, especially in a game like this, that they're very, very hard to debug, and sometimes they just fix themselves, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to complain. And if it pops its ugly head back again, then I'll worry about it. But no, it's never ending. Bugs never stop. And remember, when you're one person basically doing the game, you're doing all of the QA, you're doing the testing, you're doing the development, and so time is limited, and so it's difficult, but we're getting through it, and the game's coming around.
Just go with the mindset I have. That's not a bug. It's a feature you didn't know you wanted yet.
Exactly.
We've kind of touched on it. What have been, being a solo person, but other than being a solo developer and just the time it's taken, what have been some of the biggest hurdles in building out Legend Bowl?
I think one of them has been the customization. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, doing the pixel art is, even though I have an artist that that brings the animations to me, they come in one layer, right? So you have the entire set of arms and legs and head and facial features and hair, and all of those different elements are coming over to me in one layer. Now, I could have paid someone to do it, although I don't know, which is another part. I mean, this is another struggle, actually, is finding people that are willing to work on a sports game. I mean, a lot of developers I know for a fact, because I've talked to some of them and firsthand, and one of the biggest struggles is finding talent that actually wants to work on a football game. A lot of people who do game development are looking to play, you know, these first-person shooter games or these MMO games or these other types of, you know, genres that are not really related to football or sports in general. So finding the talent is one thing. Finding someone to do pixel art, which I found, luckily, and he's actually really, really, really good, talented, great guy too. He has brought me all this art, but then asking him to layer everything is just a whole nother level of work that I don't think anybody would do. So I had to do all of that basically myself. I had to take every single animation, a walking animation, running animation, throwing, and I had to turn those into 100 to 200 layer sprites for every single frame, because a mustache and an eye and an eyebrow. I mean, it was very, it was very tough to deal with. So that was one hurdle, but that hurdle was more of a time consumption block that I had versus complexity. But the biggest hurdle really is making a football game, like you mentioned earlier, making something that actually feels clean and actually works. I mean, to be honest, making a game that actually works on the field, that alone is a huge accomplishment for any studio or any person that's making any kind of sports game, let alone a football game. So
what has been the feedback like for this? Obviously you post these teasers or these improvements. Just the other day I'm seeing things about the ref running up and down the sidelines that you posted on your Twitter. And what has been the feedback from people reaching out to you about the progress you're making on this game?
I think it's been really positive. I mean, I've grown a small community of folks that are simulation-minded people. I mean, that's where I started. That was my hobby, as I mentioned earlier. I've done things in the community, and so I've grown this circle of people that were part of that sim community. And all of a sudden now I'm making a pixel art game, and you're like, well, wait a second, that doesn't really make sense. I want reality. I want 3D. I want people to look like the people on the field. But to be honest, it's been a very warm reception from all of my fans who follow me, and then people that are trickling in, that are coming in from the outside communities. They've never seen anything like this. I mean, they compare it to other games that are out now. The Retro Bowl game, which I'll mention, that game has done some things like what my game is trying to do, and they kind of, you know, beat me to that line. But they're on mobile, and what they do is different than what my game's going to do. And but there's a huge following for that game, and I'm very happy to see that people are interested in those types of games. So for me, I've had very, very positive feedback from all different types of people in the spectrum of gaming and sports gaming in general, from the arcade fan to the simulation person. But at the end of the day, I think what really is going to matter, which is why I'm working so hard on it, is when the people get the game in their hands, which they're going to be getting some type of beta soon, and we can talk about that. Then that's when the rubber will meet the road, and that's when I'll kind of hear, hey, this game is great, or this game is really bad, and you need to do some things about it. So I think that's going to be the time where we really see how well people like to the game.
And that is actually leading into my next question. The price you obviously don't know, but when will people be able to actually get their hands on some semblance of the game to give a shot or dive into and provide feedback?
Well, that's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out right now is the beta. So the beta is going to be where you can play. I already have it basically all set up. I'm just working through a few minor issues that are left before I release it, but the beta is almost there. I'm talking about maybe a week or two out, roughly, to have the beta ready. And so I'm still not sure if I'm going to have it be a closed beta, which I've invited people to the Discord channel for Legend Bowl to sign up for the beta and be able to get in line for that. But I'm also considering just opening it up, and that's kind of scary to do. But I'm thinking if it's a beta, and if people know it's a beta, then there's going to be some issues and there are going to be bugs. But I really could use as much eyes on it as possible, not to overwhelm me, but to make me aware of what major issues are left to work on in the game. And that's going to result in a faster release schedule. So it could be as early as 2 weeks for people, 1 week to 2 weeks for people to be able to get their hands on the game.
Moving away from the game, because we talk about Legend Bowl, but now I want people to kind of get an idea of the person behind Legend Bowl. Obviously, you're a big football fan. One of the things that they may not know about you is your involvement with the old All-Pro Football 2K8 game. And you being behind the editor that still gets used to this day by so many people. Was that just to get your feet wet in building that when you actually and granted it was a while ago that you built this, but was that just to make sure the game can stay relevant as we keep moving on because of how popular and kind of like a cult following that game really ended up getting?
Oh yeah, I mean, all pro football is to me the greatest on the field representation of the game. And looking for a new product that we can use as an alternative has been very empty for a lot of people. And so for me, it comes from the standpoint of being a sports video game and real life enthusiast, and also being a tech head, right? Somebody who does technology. And so I always, the history behind the All Pro Football editor was, there was a guy on the forums on Operation Sports actually that used to do the first editors, and he did a 2K5 editor. And then he went ahead and did a little bit of work with the All Pro Football. And I was a consumer of that. I used it, I modded, I did all those great things. And I always wondered, how is he doing this? How is this guy actually making this happen? I reached out to him multiple times, and just through a little bit of conversation and a lot of hard work, I actually dug into the game and 2K5 and All Pro Football and other games that I'm a fan of. And I went ahead and just started cranking away at code. And I think that same energy and that same frustration with our sports landscape that we have in the video game world led me to and that passion led me to work nights and weekends and just really, really grind away at trying to breathe more life into a space that we really didn't have. And so if you think about it, you're exactly right. I mean, it went from being a hobby to rolling into an actual career because of this level of thirst and hunger and void that we have in the market, in my opinion. So yeah, they all come from the same place. And that All Pro Football editor, the community is huge. I mean, they're coming in almost daily. There are people that are still jumping onto that piece of software, and I'm just so blown away by the amount of people that are interested in the game. And it proves to me that if 2K were to come out with another game, I think they would be very surprised with the amount of followers they would get overnight from their product.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love seeing personally games that are 12, 13, 14, 15 years old still get love. I mean, there's games that are 30 years old. People still play Tecmo Bowl. I mean, I still play it. There's still tournaments, NHL 94, all these classic games. And there's a reason they still get the love, is because they did something right that people just haven't gotten since or just miss. And it's personally nice to see from my aspect, seeing these types of games live on and people still wanting to improve them year over year. When it comes to, we'll wrap this up with a couple more. Obviously, football's a passion. Do you have, and this was one of the questions I got on social media, do you have a favorite team?
Well, It's usually all over my background here, but Buffalo Bills are my team. They've been my team forever.
I knew you were going with that, and I can ask you. I have a Bills banner behind me.
I saw that.
Why?
Why am I a Bills fan? Well, it's a very. I don't think the story is that great, but I mean, really, it was. I moved from Spain to Rochester, New York, when I was a young lad or whatever, and my dad bought my brother and I football gear, like all this snow gear for the winter, and my brother got the Redskins and I got the Buffalo Bills. We were right next to Buffalo and being in Rochester, so I got the local team, and he all of a sudden gave him the Redskins because we had to be different, I guess. I don't know. But it's funny because ever since that day, my brother and I still continue to follow those teams, like diehard fans of each one of those teams. And I actually grew up in South Florida around all the Miami Dolphin fans. So I had to endure, I mean, we're talking about when I was probably 3 years old, all the way up to now. I've had to endure being around our number one rival, practically, the Dolphins, right? And so, yeah, I'm a diehard Buffalo fan. Diehard.
To be fair, though, there aren't many Dolphins fans. You see that stadium, and it's really just empty seats. Now, I know I'm going to have Dolphins fans get on me, but all of my Bills fan friends will appreciate that little subtle jab. So, for those that don't know, I'm in Buffalo, born a Bills fan, converted to a Bengals fan because I liked Tigers when I was 10 years old. So my dad bought me a Corey Dillon Bengals jersey, and ever since then it's been Cincinnati. But you still have that sweet spot for the team in your hometown. So it's incredible to me to see the reach that the Bills actually have. Just everywhere I've seemed to go, I meet one, whether it's in this industry or even just on a vacation. There's always one Bills fan. So the reach there is absolutely incredible at this point.
I don't know how it happens, to be honest with you, because I'm in the same. I don't. Yeah, well,
Other than the last
well, yeah,
3
but
years.
it's well. The thing is that, like what you say about finding people. I mean, I 100% can relate. I mean, everywhere I go, I'm in Orlando, Florida now, and everywhere I go, if you're ever wearing a Bills shirt, which I'm always rocking my Bills gear whenever I can, there you'll have somebody yell across the entire store, be like, "Hey, go Buffalo!" And I'll be like, "Yeah, go Buffalo," because we're kind of like that blue collar. That blue collar team that we did things that no other team has ever done, and we get made fun of for that. We get ridiculed for that, but we went to the Super Bowl 4 times. We had some of the best, most potent teams and offenses and defenses that ever were assembled in the NFL football league, and we just couldn't close the final game. But at the same time, we had a dynasty of a team, and people, I think, They live and die by that team, and we're not going to give up. And I think that with everything going on in the league, I mean, minus the current events that are happening, I think that we have a very, very bright future, and I'm excited to see what they can do because it's been a long time coming. And so watch out, the AFC East. Buffalo Bills are coming for you, baby.
And on that note, we are going to end this installment of the SGO Developer Spotlight. Javier, thank you again for taking the time and joining, talking Legend Bowl, All-Pro Football, and even the Buffalo Bills. It goes all over the place on this. Again, Legend Bowl coming soon-ish to Steam. Be sure to follow Javier on Twitter. Could you go ahead and plug anything you have to plug? Your Twitter, your website, anything you want people to follow.
Sure thing, man. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity. I hope that people out there will like what they see with our game, and if not, we're going to try to improve it. So we're there for the community. I'm from the community, so I'm one of the guys, as you say. But it was great talking to you. As far as any plugs, if you guys want to do anything to support the game, the best thing that you can do, whether you have a PC or not, is go ahead and jump on Steam and wishlist our game. Wish lists are the key for the game getting the visibility it needs, and that visibility is going to go a long way when it comes to going to consoles, going to mobile, going to any other platform that you may be a fan of. So wish list the game, and you can follow me over on Twitter, which is my main tag here, which is @KingJavo_SH. and there'll be a lot of news coming, so stay tuned.